Given the present West Asia war situation, and we have an idea, there will be a phased process in it and this will take time. But if it continues just like Ukraine and Russia, where is the Indian economy standing?
What the new thing has come out that one of the cores of our future is going to be UAE.
So you've been mentioning about FTAs. We have been signing a lot of bilateral FTAs in the past few months or years, but most of the FTAs, the partner country is benefiting more than India. If you see the effectiveness of trade-specific relations, what do you think for this IOR, modified IOR?
You raise a good question. In some sense, this IOR region will be a mix. It's not pure.
You mentioned that we should use our diaspora. Do you think it would translate into trade?
What is amazing is the cultural links. You must have read that the ancient links with the Roman trade. I mean, it's amazing. One estimate which has been given is that 1/3 of the revenues of the entire Roman Empire came from trade with India. So they had a tariff.
Good evening, everyone. Our guest today is Dr. Arvind Virmani, former Executive Director at the International Monetary Fund, former Chief Economic Advisor to the Ministry of Finance, former Principal Advisor at the Planning Commission, and former member of Niti Aayog. Over the past few months, I have been closely analyzing the economic and geopolitical implications of the ongoing West Asia conflict, both for India and for the global economy. During one such discussion with Dr. Virmani, I shared my idea of doing a podcast on these evolving global shifts and he graciously agreed immediately. For me as an economist, it is both an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to engage with someone who has contributed so significantly to India's economic policy making over the past decades. In this conversation, we discussed Dr. Virmani's visionary concept of the Gondwana economic region, presented in his published paper, which is linked in the description below. The idea explores a strategic economic corridor connecting Asia, Africa, Gulf region and island economies through trade, logistics, connectivity, cultural exchange and people-to-people ties, with India positioned at the central hub linking these regions all together. This discussion also examines how historical civilizational and trade linkages can potentially re-emerge in a modern economic framework. Alongside this, we analyze the challenges emerging from current West Asia conflict, possible risks to the global economy, and the strategic opportunities that may arise for India right now for the coming years. Without taking much of your time, let's begin the podcast. See you there. Sir, thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast. So we've been discussing the West Asia war for the past few weeks and I came across your paper, a visionary paper I would say. Could you please give us a broad idea?
So, as you know, the paper is titled Gondwana, Economic Integration of the IOR region. Now, the basic idea from this came when I was writing this paper called Vision 2050 about some years ago, 3-4 years ago, while I was at IGRO. Basically, what I started thinking was where will India be in the future in terms of trade and economic relations? So, geoeconomics, if you will, rather than geopolitics or national security. Which of course is a separate topic, but interrelated. If you look across the world, you have a North America Association, you have an European Union, you have ASEAN on our east. People have been talking about Asia Pacific, APEC. So in a sense, I felt what is the region in which the future of India in that sense lies, right? Who are our closest? So that is where we thought of the Indian Ocean region. There is a reason why it's called the Indian Ocean region. And then the rest of it in terms of choke points, etc., we can discuss later. That was more to motivate. So looking forward into the future of the global economy, I thought that and then of course we investigated details. We'll go into whether it's historical connections in the Indian Ocean region, whether it's culture, even administration, and politics. So a whole bunch of things emerged which are in the paper, in the starting of the paper before we get into the economics. And so this is kind of the natural region for developing some kind of a future. As I named it, I called it Gondwana because Africa will be very important in the future, 20, 30 years from now. And of course, currently the Gulf is very important. So, and ASEAN has been one of the fastest growing regions in the world. So bringing all these together in a sense, and developing working towards an Indian Ocean common market, which may actually take a lot of time, just as the European Union took a lot of time.
So, sir, in your paper, you are saying that India will become a rule creator rather than becoming, we are a rule taker right now. So, we'll be becoming a rule creator. But to become a creator of rules for all of those countries in the region, do you think we need internal reforms, institutional reforms? If yes, what are those reforms? Where do we have to start, sir?
So, real rule creator is not just about the Indian Ocean, of course. The rules created which are important for the whole world before we get to these blocks is, of course, the UN. So, in that sense, we start with UN reform, which we have been, a lot of us have been talking about for a long time. In fact, in my I think it was a paper in 2004, where I gave a new way of deciding on the rules of a reformed UN, where both population and in sense of democracy and economic power are balanced, unlike the current. Anyway, that's a different. But you're starting straight away with the internal stuff, which is slightly outside what the paper is about. But reforms is a continuing process. In my view, again, I've written about this in the paper. It started in the 1980s. There was a big spurt in the 90s. Then in the 2000s, there were various actions under the Prime Minister Vajpayee. And then another big spurt of reforms, which started with the pandemic crisis. So that is a continuing process. It is very critical for economic growth and development of economic power. But it's not just about economic power and growth. It also generates the revenue which you need, both for public goods infrastructure and for social purposes. So to me, I use the simple slogan, fast, sustained, inclusive growth. To me, it's not a choice of one or the other. It's a wrong way to think that we can just do welfare without growth, because that is disaster. So in a sense, the growth, the reforms to productivity to growth is part of the same kind of interlinked chain of development, which then gives you power to operate from where we started, to project, peacefully project your power, whether it's in the UN or the Indian Ocean.
So, sir, this paper has come at a time when we have this West Asia war crisis. So, do you think the idea will be relevant for a long term architecture for India, or it is just a short term strategy to just divert away? And there has to be a starting point, because there are multiple things that need to happen. What do you think will be the starting point for this idea to execute?
So there is always, I have been part of so many reforms, as I mentioned, since 1980. And the slogan which came up, which many of us talked about, is crisis. A crisis is too good an opportunity to waste, right? So a crisis, I think, is always an opportunity. I always look at the positive side. When a crisis comes, everybody's worrying about the crisis. My approach is, what is the opportunity in the crisis? I've always done that, from the 80s, 90s, etc. So the opportunity of this is because, as we show in the paper, the choke points is something which defines, in a way, the Indian Ocean region. And the crisis really brings out to everybody that this is so important. The choke points have to be accounted for in any future. So it's not just a question of immediate, it is using the immediate crisis to build an architecture and a system for the future. So it's both in that sense. Now, the choke points we all know: Bab el Mandab, Hormuz, Malacca, etc. So we need not go into that, but those are all talked about in the paper. And of course, the crisis has also sharpened. So I hope to have a modified paper which now takes account of, for example, it is clear now that when we talk about corridors, we have to integrate the oil and gas pipelines into that. That is something perhaps we had not thought very clearly about when I did this paper. We did. I have a co-author, Shruti. So that, I think, needs to be built in, and the architecture of the details of these things will change. So choke point doesn't only mean that. So the choke point means this is a safe zone in some sense. You may recall, maybe you did a show on the pandemic. There were a lot of supply chain disruptions. So all these things have brought home. It doesn't mean that we'll not have relations with outside powers, but we must have some core of a safe zone. Just like the European Union has the whole continental Western Europe thing. They still trade with the UK, they trade with America, they trade with ASEAN, with India, etc. That will happen here also, but there is at least a core, internal core. The only thing which the crisis has alerted us is that we have to pay much more attention. Well, reinforced. I think pandemic did that earlier, and many other crises. We have to again pay some price to have a certain degree of self-sufficiency within the region, whether it's oil, minerals, or anything else.
So, sir, in the paper you mentioned that we have to integrate ASEAN, there is Gulf, there is Africa. So we have to integrate all of these things together in the modified IOR, which is Gondwana that you named. So do you think that economically this is a good idea, but geopolitically it is really difficult to integrate all of these together? And if we want to do it, where can we start?
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. That is why one had to be very careful in wording also, especially because I was in government. One does not want to offend. Of course, now that I'm freer, I will be more explicit in the next version of the paper. But the issue is, there are countries like, let's start from Africa. South Africa is part of the South African Union. There is an East African Union. There is a GCC. There is ASEAN. So, but the idea is that a core group of these countries can get together and form the rules and procedures, because you don't want to start with all the complications together. Which is selected depends on the geopolitics. I think the MEA and others are more competent to actually select, because they know the inside. I'm just looking at it as an outsider. So in that sense, so what we looked at was how is there anything in their kind of current rules which will restrict this. And the only thing which that is if there's a common tariff or external tariff, because you can't have the common tariff is very important for the future. So it turns out that they don't have any specific rules which forbid them from doing this. So in principle, you could build a FTA or a CEPA which integrates the rules, not just the rules and regulations, but also the tariffs in a single. But that's like a slow process. Now, you asked, where do we start? Yes. So that is absolutely a question, because the moment you get into a very ambitious project, so what we suggested was that we start small, taking the cue from the so-called, there was a coal and steel community in the European Union, which was the core. Now, common market, everybody thinks of common market as easy. It took decades to achieve that. So we thought the most common thing is where there's demand and supply are both within this conceived core IOR region, as we called it, what are the key things? There's energy, oil and gas, and critical minerals, which is a big thing. All minerals actually, but again, using the current to drive a future growth. You said again, immediate, is it immediate or it's future?
Yeah.
It's actually using the current opportunity to drive a better future.
But sir, do you think comparing all of these things with the European Union is like comparing apples and oranges? Because they had a different structure, a political structure. They had a different structure of the union. They were almost more together compared to the IOR region.
So
We
you are right, but in a
Hmm.
completely opposite way from what you're saying. Let
Okay,
me
sir.
explain. Europe actually had 100 years war. So Europe was actually warring countries,
Hmm.
unlike India. I mean, unlike the IOR, most of the countries which we expect to form the core have not been fighting with each other. That's the whole concept of the core which we are using.
Hmm.
That the core will be countries which have not been fighting with each other. Europe fought with each other. Their objective was how can we have future of 100 years of peace after 100 years of war. So in some sense, it was much more difficult for them. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, it is not that it was easy.
Hmm.
And that is why they took this small step. Okay, maybe we can have a common coal and steel policy.
Hmm.
They didn't think they'll have an EFTA even.
Hmm.
That took many years. Okay. But you're right to some extent. There are issues, there are conflicting interests. So that is the tricky part which really our diplomats will have to address. Again, I'm not, as an economist, I can just give the economic ideas and persuade. So that was the idea of the paper, that let us bring out the advantages, the gains, the positives, and of course the difficulties in economics, but the political stuff would really be addressed. But we know from experience that starting small is a good way to start, even diplomatically.
Hmm.
Beyond that, the diplomats will say.
So, sir, in the paper you've mentioned that 14% of the global trade is from this region
Yeah.
and 33% of FDI inflows are already from this region.
Yeah.
So, this region and the importance of this region, it's there since ages. You've also mentioned there are historical trade networks that used to be there in this region and we have to revive it. Why do you think we've not been able to do it by far?
See, the main reason is that each of the country, till 1945, till the World War, many of the countries of the region were connected with their colonial power. So, even if you take South Africa, India, we had better relations with Britain than with each other. So, the old networks of both trade, transport, logistics, everything goes through. They are French colonies. They are more connected with France than with India, even though we are so close. So, really, the idea, the hard work means, though we examined the transport connectivity, it's actually not that bad. But the conceptual framework, the mental way of looking at it is still looking to, let's say, UK, France, or whatever. So part of this idea is how do we change this outlook? And then that's where the core idea comes in, and thinking about an FTA. Once you start thinking, then you start thinking of what are the missing links, what is we develop. For example, we find that for some countries in Africa, there is only one sailing per week. Now that's certainly not good enough to have this great idea. So like that, once we start looking at it, maybe that will can
lot
be
of
increased to
possibilities.
two sailings, maybe one a week. I mean, that's the idea, to plant this idea, then maybe form working groups, select a core of countries, get the process going. That really is the job of the diplomats and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, who do these sort of things. But the idea of the paper is to start the thinking on how. Maybe now academic institutions will pick it up, and try to develop based on their own experience. Some have more experience on Africa. Some are experts on GCC. I'm not a regional expert. So hopefully, if this is discussed and propagated, the regional specialists will start thinking, okay, how can we promote this?
So you've mentioned that we should use our diaspora.
Yeah.
Do you think it would translate into trade?
Yeah, so let me give a little bit because we have not discussed it. What is amazing is the cultural links. Frankly, over the last year or two, I have also learned, you must have read that the ancient links with the Roman trade. I mean, it's amazing. One estimate which has been given is that 1/3 of the revenues of the entire Roman Empire came from trade with India. So they had a tax, a tariff on India Roman trade. Rome was, of course, in Egypt, what is now Egypt. So their empire was there. That, and then we developed this human connectivity index, which again is it's quite amazing. So the details are in the paper. But for example, the interesting, which kind of shocked me, the index for India and Oman is something like 87, out of 100. That close links with Oman. Then if you look more closely, till very recently, some of the Gulf states and parts of Oman were actually ruled from India, before independence. So the links with this region are enormous, not just trade, but the human connectivity. They have frayed a little because we have not sustained them. So again, that's why this paper is important, that we must go back, and it won't be difficult to revive those links. Now, coming specifically to trade, why human links are important is because trade depends critically on information and knowledge, and that is facilitated by people who can speak a similar language, who can feel comfortable with each other. That's where this human connectivity is very important. Of course, there have to be economic opportunities and profits in doing it, but that's what you started with, right? There are opportunities. There are much more opportunities, and if these links can be revived, these people themselves will. It's not for government. Government should just set the environment. The people will discover themselves the enormous opportunities of investing in each other, trading in each other. But that human connectivity facilitates the initial stuff. People feel comfortable.
That's interesting. A lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
So, sir, you've mentioned about this modified IOR region, but the problem is that we already have UN and we already have other organizations like WTO. The effectiveness of all of these organizations are being questioned now after Trump took his second term in the office. So do you think for this region there has to be an enforcement body or something like that which ensures that things happen in the right way?
See, I think again you're going back to a bigger level, but I will address that. See, when we talk about UN and WTO, we are talking about an umbrella in which all these common markets, FTAs, etc. fit. Here we are talking about one of these FTAs in a way, okay? Not the broad architecture. So that broad architecture, different issue. I wouldn't want to get into it. It's a whole subject in itself. But yes, that is important. But what we are talking about is the regional connectivity, economic integration. Just like European Union is now fully integrated. I don't know if you know or your viewers know. The EU sets all external trade policies. The states are still independent. They have their own army, navy, whatever other policies. But the trade policy is set by the EU based in Brussels. Okay. So tariffs are unified externally. That is the kind of thing we are talking about for the future, maybe 20 years from now in this region. So I think there are two different levels. I don't think there's any contradiction. This would be within the overall framework of UN WTO.
So you've been mentioning about FTAs. I wanted to ask this, that we have been signing a lot of bilateral FTAs in the past few months or years. But what is happening is most of the FTAs, the partner country is benefiting more than India, if you see the effectiveness of trade specific relations. So what do you think for this IOR, modified IOR, where can India actually bring out some better reforms so that we can benefit in the FTAs?
So I think this has been a controversial issue where I have been on the opposite end from many of my old colleagues. And when I say old, they are pretty old like me. So most of them have been very enamored by China and the growth of China and the growth of ASEAN. In my view, that's all over. That's the past, actually. So what I have argued for a long time, and which the government also acted by rejecting RCEP, I was probably the only economist who agreed with the government. Everybody else criticized that why are we rejecting RCEP. So the concept there is basically that our failure has been to not integrate with the high income countries. All these Southeast Asians first integrated with high income countries, some with Japan, some with South Korea, some with America. For example, Malaysia with America, Toyota came, Japan with Thailand, Samsung in South Korea. They integrated with the high income countries, the developed countries. And then those links are very strong. When we sign an FTA with those countries or get into RCEP, those links don't change. So there's no diversion. They don't import from you. The import is dependent on Samsung or whatever. I don't want to be specific,
The
but I'm
lead
just
firms.
giving you an example
Yeah.
of the high income country. So what we needed, I had argued, was FTAs with the high income countries, the same country. Of course, we have with Japan and Korea, but we didn't. Let's say with Australia, we have signed now. New Zealand,
EU talks.
EU, we are almost there, except the formal legal stuff is to be. And similarly with the US, why it is so critical for us? Because we kind of miss the older bus. The US companies are there in all these countries. How to attract them? We need an extra push. Okay, and the FTAs are critical for that, because it'll give them the comfort level. Okay, why should they shift? Let's say, just as an example, from ASEAN to here, or some parts from ASEAN to here, or a whole supply chain from China, is the comfort level increases. Okay, so that is why I have argued. So it's like having an FTA with a competitor which has not been successful because of these links they have, versus a cooperator, or a complementary country. So this concept will remain. We still have it. But you raise a good question in the sense that, in some sense, this IOR region will be a mix. It's not pure. Okay? That is why it requires careful build-up. Again, going back to your very correct question, that this is going to be a difficult thing. That's why all we have argued is we must start the process. Okay? It may take 10 years. Doesn't matter. Europe took 20 years. I don't remember the exact time, but something like that. So yes, because there'll be poorer countries, there'll be middle income countries. UAE is a rich country. So there will be all these. That is why it's very important for there to be a core group which represents all these interests, which thinks seriously about the long term. Don't be short term about it. Okay, it won't work. Okay, so that is the point which I have suggested. We are suggesting two things. One is start with the easy stuff where everybody will likely agree. Cooperation on energy and minerals, because African countries, most of them which we have suggested, have minerals or potential minerals. So it's mutually benefit for India, for them, that we have this. Similarly, energy economies, we have the demand, they have the supply, mutual benefit. So start with the easy stuff, work out the rules of the game, which will be lasting. So yes, it won't be easy, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, this is an amazing idea, really visionary. But we are talking about a lot of external factors, that we need to do this, we need to connect with this country, this region, this area, and our geography. In terms of geography, we are positioned in a position where we can actually be a neutral curator between all of these regions. But sir, do you think to effectively execute this idea, Gondwana idea, we first need internal reforms within our country, and our institutional reforms have to be there?
Let me, one thing I did not say. Please remember also that there's an advantage to all these countries of having this vis-a-vis India. We are the fastest growing large economy. We have the largest share of that. That's our selling point. I don't want to oversell it, because you can't turn off the countries. It's a positive part. This market can be available for them. We already say that for our immediate neighborhood. So in a way, if you think of it, we are just expanding the neighborhood. That's another way to think of it. We have a neighborhood policy. We are a great source of demand for, let's say, Sri Lanka, Nepal, even Mauritius already, Maldives, etc., Bangladesh, right? So in one way of thinking of it is this idea is to expand it to the whole IOR region. So being the bigger party, yes, we will have to open our markets. So if you're talking about, let's say, reforms in trade and tariff policy, in a way, that's exactly what will happen. So when we are having a FTA with UK, for example, we have opened up. I think they have opened up 99% to zero tariff. We have done 90% or something. But we are opening up. We use that as an opportunity to reform our trade policy. This is something they don't realize when all these existing FTAs, leave aside the one I'm talking about here, are in place, when they are active. There would have been a huge reform of the trade policy. We will become a very open economy. They are not realizing. Okay, they keep thinking of the tariffs which will apply to China or something. Okay, but all these will be zero. Huge reform of trade policy. Now, your other point of reform, yes, reform is important to take full use of, whether it is this FTAs or new ones, are absolutely critical. Just to take one example, which is a very difficult one. This government, others in different forms have been talking, this government have been talking about EODP. I think it's a word which has become popular in the last 10 years because this government has really pushed it. Ease of doing business. But the way I've looked at it for 30 years, there's a jungle of controls. There are things out there you never even have heard of, even me, who has been working on these things for 50 years. For example, I was talking to my friend who is in the next Sanjeev Sanyal. He has tried to document the amazing, incredible jungle which is out there. Okay, so it's going to be a huge effort. It's at the state level, it's everywhere. So yes, we must continue to do that. There are some organizations, I don't want to name them again because I have often worked with them, but which are a law unto themselves. Just to give a generic example without naming, they lose a case at one level, they object at the second level, they lose it, the second level, they go to the third level. This is crazy. It means that cases go on for 20 years for no purpose, except you get a bad reputation. The country gets a bad reputation. The business people outside say, ye kya ho raha hai? Okay? So let me give a solution to that because I've just thought of it.
Yes, sir.
What I suggested was there should be a level till the or whatever. Let's say it's a department B. Okay? There should be maybe 2 revisions which they can file. After that, there should be a completely independent organization. They should have no role in it. So that a new fresh comes in, कि ये क्यों कर रहे हैं भैया? वो करते जाओगे. Every time you lose, you go to a higher court. For what purpose? Is it serving the country? What is the purpose? Is it satisfying your ego, or is there some problem with your structure? So reforms, yes, absolutely necessary. There are few critical ones at the central level, lot of them at the state level, because ultimately, remember, when there's a factory on the ground, it's the ground level things matter. No? They are not controlled from Delhi.
Yes, sir.
It's the people out there. So who are those? Those are largely state and local governments. Okay, there may be 1 or 2 departments of the central government. So yes, that is very, very important. If you really want to be let's say a developed country or a superpower, that's critical.
Sir, you've had an illustrious career as an economist. I really want to ask you, from your experience, for all of these reforms and to actually execute these visionary ideas, what is the hardest nut to crack in India?
Dekho, there is difficulty at every stage. I'll tell you, I had a little book, I've taken that. In 1999, I wrote, I was suggested, in fact, the suggestion came from the PMO of that time. Badao, reforms kya karne hai? So I wrote a 30-page paper, which I converted into a book later, where it took decades, literally, for all those reforms to happen. So first is just acceptance. Okay. The rest is later. The second is actual implementation into a law or a
Yes.
rule. And third, and then making sure the rules work. So my advice to aspiring youngsters, I'm old now, I can't, I can just talk, is that you've got to be patient, don't give up. So my strategy used to be, if something is not being heard, I would just write a paper or something and put it, leave it. It'll come. I'm telling you, 99% of the reform which I mentioned in that note, which is now how many years? 25 years, have been implemented. But this didn't happen while I was in the place. They happened later.
So this is inspiring. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sir, so for trade, there is tariffs, there are non-tariff barriers, there are logistics, there is financing, there is political coordination. So for effective trade to happen, all of these things are necessary. And in India, since we know we need a lot of institutional reforms in a lot of places,
Yeah.
how do we coordinate all of these things properly?
Right. So there are two things. One is, it's important to, when it's a law or something, it's important to get it done. Because then that one hurdle is removed of parliament, right? The other is more coordination, which is administratively feasible. Yes, I think, we talked 10, 15 years ago. Well, part of Niti, going from planning commission to Niti, was that we go from a national planning to more decentralized approach. But there are two important things in that. One is that one idea was that we go from kind of physical planning to policy planning. Okay, तो ये मत सोचो कि इसको यहाँ पे प्रोड्यूस करना है या उसको एक्सपैंड करना है, कि पॉलिसी क्या है, to set the environment in which the private sector will do rather than the government doing everything. So that was one thing. And the second, you're absolutely right, wherever the government is still acting, or even in policies, that coordination element is still needs to be strengthened. This is right. So these are the two things which I think are still, but as far as, your first question on implementation, that is really beyond me. That is, the bureaucrats have to do it. There's no other. Once the policy is decided, when the law is clear, it's really after that, it's the bureaucrats,
Sir, but do you think that we actually put thinkers aside and we put executors aside, but both of them, they also have to work in coordination? There is a thinker and there is an executor.
See, you were telling me about your own story before this thing. It's not a question of putting them together. It's each of them understanding the other. There is no good policy advice which has not thought of the implementation. There is no good implementer who has not thought about the policy. It doesn't mean that I may be a policy expert, but I have to think about what the goal is, where it is going. Otherwise, it's just academic. So that's a fundamental characteristic of a policy advisor, that they have to understand how it is implemented, and vice versa. The implementers, good implementers, understand this. I have had one or two very good friends. Well, you worked in Dr. Venugopal Reddy. He was a friend who passed away a couple of years ago. But that's the thing. He was a bureaucrat, but he understood where I'm coming from. And similarly, I understood what has to be done. So the practical elements, right? So it's not that there has to be day-to-day coordination, but there has to be an understanding, a willingness to understand. If I say the bureaucrats are all nonsense or they are no good, it won't work. If they think all these policy advisors know nothing, we are the top of the thing, then nothing will happen. वो committee बना दोगे क्या फायदा है? कुछ फायदा नहीं है. The attitude is the important thing.
So, sir, given the present West Asia war situation, and we have an idea, and obviously this will take time, there will be a phased process in it, and this will take time. But given the current situation, what do you have
Yeah.
to say to the viewers that in this West Asia war crisis, if it continues just like
Yeah.
Ukraine and Russia, where is the Indian economy standing?
Yeah, I think we will need a whole new
Podcast
conference for that.
Yes, sir.
But what I want to say, which is
Briefly.
related, is that what the new thing has come out, that we need some. In fact, I was just looking at it for it yesterday or day before. That one of the cores of our future is going to be UAE. So the pipelines, the Fujairah pipeline which goes to Abu Dhabi, maybe will have to be extended further. So that is the thing which I think we need to think of, given the new learning or experience, the pipelines. Okay. And I think that's going to be very important. So coordinate the pipelines and the railway lines. Pipelines for stuff to go out, railway lines for things to come in, whether it's food or other items. If the strait of this or that is closed, there must be an alternative. It may only carry 10-20% of inflows and outflows, but it's going to be very, very important for the future. So I think those things we need to think of. Just to conclude, you said about what India. So, India has managed many oil shocks, and I'm sure we will manage it. But the way I have always analyzed thing, which is not common for people who do short term, is like a tax. I tell the common person, for us, given our large dependence on import of oil and gas and the inelasticity, you will understand, you've done economics, the inelasticity, the short-term virtual inelastic demand, what it acts is very simple. It's like a tax. It's like the oil exporters taxing our people. So what is the effect? The effect of taxation is the income available to the public, and their consumption has to go down. That's the effect of a tax. The tax, if it's an internal tax, the government can use it for public goods or investment, which can offset this problem. But when the tax goes out, your income is lower. There is no question about it. We have to, then the only thing left is how to minimize the cost to the public and how to make sure we are ready for the future. So I'll just mention the positive side. The future is there's going to be big opportunities for reconstruction. Again, silver lining. Please note that I'm not saying no bad thing will happen, but I always look at the silver lining. Everybody, you can go and ask all the negatives, they'll tell you. But the silver lining is that we must be prepared to use these opportunities to accelerate growth. Maybe we'll catch up that loss. Okay. So the opportunity for oil pipelines, gas pipelines, for new corridors. Let's not be stuck with IMEC only. Maybe they'll come out, maybe it won't. Okay, maybe some new corridors. Let's think again. Construction opportunities, military, defense production, whatever. So the thing is to enthuse the people, go out and look. Be ready.
Thank you so much, sir. So you asked me a question, why do you do this podcast? Because you got to know about it now. So this is the reason I've been working with you for the past few weeks. But sitting together for a podcast, it actually inspires me, sir.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you.